So the first part of this video, I am using Audacity. In this topic, I'm going to cover the MTA telling Charlie Pallet to screw you, and then the other part I want to talk about is that the NYPD needs to reevaluate their situation with patrolling subway stations, and I will go into that in a sec. But the first issue I want to talk about before we transition into the OBS screen recorder is that you're looking at Charlie Pallet. Now, you may be wondering, well, who is this guy? Well, if you don't know who he is, you may recognize him from saying, and I quote, "Stand clear of the closing door, please." Yes, that's the guy who, in the 90s, the MTA hired to bring on to make subway announcements. And it used to be, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is an important message from the New York City Police Department." And I noticed something on Tuesday last week when I was on the F train. And this was past Union Turnpike. And I was wondering, that's odd. Why is the conductor or the engineer making these announcements in the subway? Where's the Charlie Pallet recordings? And then I found out the MTA said, "Screw you" to Charlie Pallet. They're still using his "stand clear of the closing door" message. And I don't know. And this is something I'm annoyed about. And I understand in this day and age that there are many genders out there in 2018. I get that. And YouTube is very friendly towards those people. But what I don't get is that they left Charlie Pallet out in the curb. Alright? They brought him in the 90s to record those messages. And they've been the same messages that the MTA has used for almost 30 years. Why wouldn't they bring Charlie Pallet to record a quick message that said, "Attention MTA subway riders, this is an important message from the New York City Police Department. If you see a suspicious bag or package, please tell an MTA employee or notify a police officer. If you see something, say something." That's what they could have made Charlie Pallet say. And I've been riding the subways now for almost 10 years. I first started riding them in 2009 when I was about 14 years old. Alright? And I'm used to the Charlie Pallet recordings. You know, I love those recordings. Especially how sometimes, I will admit, I flip on Bloomberg Radio to go to quick update, and he's the guy that does the updates on Bloomberg Radio. You know, I get curious about the world of business, especially how Trump's handling our economy, which is a topic we won't get into, but the point I'm trying to make here is that the MTA should call Charlie Pallet, make the announcement, and say, "Attention all MTA subway riders." And then make him, or what they could do is, like when I'm doing on Audacity, they could just make him record that quick line and then put the other clip using Audacity and then make all the subway trains play the Charlie Pallet message again. And I have a lot of respect for Charlie Pallet anyway. He's a veteran broadcaster, not just for the MTA, but for Bloomberg Radio. And I feel bad that the MTA just kicked him to the curb. I'm sorry, but ever since they dropped that "ladies and gentlemen" thing, it has been so hard to hear announcements on the subway. I'm sorry. If it's just me or if it's just you, comment below if you're a strap hanger and let me know how you feel, because I understand we're in an age of transgender people. I get that. But in order for the MTA to fix this, they need Charlie Pallet to record one simple line, so that way we can finally hear our subway announcements, and more importantly, no genders will be excluded, because many of you know I've been very supportive of LGBT, so there's that factor. So I hope Charlie Pallet's on board. I hope the MTA will reconsider. So that's how I end this part of the video, and now we're going to transition into the OBS recorder, where we had two major subway stabbings on January 14th. now we're using OBS, and thankfully with video editing, it's easier to transition into the next scene. So, first up, we are going to talk about how there is no law and order on our subways. And honestly, and I've known the subway system even before I took it, but I had a grandfather who worked for the Transit Authority, and he used to tell me when I was a kid, thankfully with the law and order we've had, and this is when I was young, I understood what 9/11 was. After 9/11, the police were always there whenever there was a problem, if there was a stabbing, or if there was ever a problem. And now, with Mayor Asshole, which unfortunately he's that much of a moron to not realize what's going on with our subways. And this is something, also another concern I talked about with PinePower Long Island, was that these problems are going to continue. It's 4 more years of this, thanks to Bill de Blasio's recklessness. So, first, let's just, again, this is not about, subways individually, but this is about policing on our subways. Alright, so what happened was a 29-year-old man was stabbed in the stomach at the Times Square subway station on January 14th. He was attacked near the turnstiles for the train at the Times Square station just before 5 p.m., officials said. The attacker fled the scene on the street. The good news is this did not affect subway service. So that's the good thing. This did not affect subway service. But what I don't get is that now it's law and order. There is no law and order. There is no quality of life in Manhattan. You have to watch your back when you go past that turnstile, or even before you go past that turnstile. Because right now, taking the subways in Manhattan is getting more dangerous. And in fact, now the police don't even care that you can cross the turnstile. So you mean to tell me that when I pay my fare with my MetroCard swipe, it really won't matter anymore? There was a report on January 1st that a man was seen going above the turnstile. Yes, going above the turnstile at the Port Authority station. This was reported on January 1st by the NYPD. I have an anonymous source who told me this, but the NYPD did report this, and none of the media outlets don't care. Because you know why? It's just a minor incident. Nobody got hurt, but you know who gets hurt? You know who gets hurt? The taxpayers, customers, and the MTA. That's who gets hurt. No one really cares about this other information. And then we're going to talk about how the 7 train is becoming more of a disaster each and every day. This is the wrong article. I don't know why that pulled up, but I'll get the article up in a sec. But this was the Twitter feed today. I'll pull it up. So what happened was there was another stabbing in Queensboro Plaza. And I've only been there once because the express trains were messed up and I made the stupid decision that time to take the Q32 bus in Roosevelt Avenue. But alright, so what happened was earlier on January 14th in the afternoon, there was a slashing on the 7 train platform in Queensboro Plaza. So story goes, if I can put this in full screen, thank you very much. Story goes, slashing on the 7 train platform. The victim is expected to be okay. But here's the problem. This affected 7 train service yet again today. And the 7 overall today has been a complete mess. And I'm sorry if I didn't zoom in earlier, but we're going to zoom in now so that way if anybody's on a smartphone, I can explain it to you better. So that way you all know how the subways are now becoming a criminal's paradise now. Because honestly, it has become a criminal's paradise. And I will admit, since de Blasio has taken office, I have seen people jump the turnstiles. I'm not going to say when and where, but I have seen it. But that one anonymous report on January 1st at the Port Authority station was an anonymous report sent to the NYPD. And again, I'm not going to name my source, but it did happen. Someone was reported jumping the turnstile, and the individual was charged with a misdemeanor. And they called that a misdemeanor because you are jumping the turnstile. Alright? And I've known about these incidents. It honestly began when de Blasio took office. Alright? I've heard about these reports since January of 2014. Alright? So let's keep in mind that de Blasio has been here for 4 years, and the NYPD has to deal with these degenerates, but that's the word I'm going to be using here, who violate transit authority property and refuse to swipe their Metro cards. Okay. So here we go. Let's start off with how the 7 had problems. I think we can go back. Can we go back that far? Yeah, because normally PinePower does this when he's looking for his information. Oh, who cares about Jimmy Fallon at Madame Tussauds? The 7 train's a mess! Alright, so here's our first issue with the 7 train. Alright? So what happened was, earlier in the morning on the date of January 14th, Main Street bound 7 trains were running with delays because of a train with mechanical problems at Grand Central 42nd Street. Okay? So that's not the first problem that happened on the 7. Here's the next problem. Some 34th Street bound 7 trains end at Hunters Point Avenue or Queensboro Plaza. So those customers got screwed. There was no way for those customers to get over along the 5th Avenue tracks. Let's go up again. Shuttle train service was available, so they apparently made the S run to 34th Street Hudson Yards. So, you know, when there's a problem with the 7, I have to bring it up because the 7 is a priority subway in Queens. It is. And I have never seen the 7 this bad before. I first started noticing the 7 becoming this bad last year, but now it's transitioning into 2018, and it's also transitioning into our express subways in Queens. And I did see something earlier. Yes, here's a tweet I saw earlier before I recorded, that northbound E and F trains were running with delays because of signal problems at Forest Hill 71st Avenue. So trying to get into Jamaica was a problem with the express subways again. Alright, and this is how the Twitter feed covered the stabbing. I think there was a... I'm going to double check. I know there was... Oh, here's how they covered it. 34th Street Hudson Yard bound 7s are running express from 74th Broadway to Queensboro Plaza because of NYPD activity at Queensboro Plaza. So, what happened was they had to make all those passengers go on the Q32 bus to access some of their stops. So, 7 wasn't running local. And then quickly, I just want to show you what happened on the 4, 5, and 6. So, I know a couple people who take the F. You know, they have to transfer over to Lexington Avenue and 59th Street to access the 4, 5, and 6 trains. So what happened was we had an unruly passenger at 68th Street, Hunter College tonight. So I'm going to end it on this note, and we're going to end it off with the photo from the crime scene tonight. I think there was a photo. Or if I don't find it, that's alright, but I figured this headline will wake up people and make us realize that right now, it's not just the delays that are becoming a problem, it's law and order. And right now, you are seeing under the de Blasio administration that it's every man for himself, every person for himself, or whatever the gender could be, because we're in 2018, don't forget that. And what I want to see the police do, and this is how I feel, is that if something is wrong, there should be an officer in every station with a patrol car at least 2 to 4 blocks away. There should be an officer near every station. I'm not asking for all, but all the high traffic stations, there should be an officer on the scene when something happens in the outer boroughs. Alright? I see it all the time in not Forest Hills, Kew Gardens Union Turnpike Station. There's always a police officer who does patrols outside of the stations. But they should be dispatched immediately when stuff like this happens. They normally are. It should not take them more than 15 minutes to assess a situation. If they have to do an investigation, I understand that. But now, it's all about how we are not being safe on our subways. And if you have to fight off your attacker, and I encourage you, only if you're being attacked. And if you're a woman, I'm sorry for saying this, but this is what, I talked to older people who rode the subways a long time ago, and they told me it was dangerous in the 70s and 80s. They told me they would always carry a whistle and mace with them in case they were getting mugged or stabbed. I am really thinking about getting mace. I am really considering it. Because this is becoming a problem. This is becoming a dangerous situation with our subways. And I will also admit that, yes, I've been jumped, but that was only to shut up somebody who kept shouting out Black Lives Matter in Rockefeller Center, alright? I will admit that. But if I had my mace, believe me, I would have sprayed him and punched him right in the face. And I'm sorry for saying that, but that's what I would have done, and then reported it to the cops. And at least film the guy. Because this is about safety. Alright? And if we don't step up now, and if we don't take action, then honestly, it's going to become more and more of a lawless subway. And I will admit this, because I want to stop recording, to make my final point. We had law and order on our subways when Guliani and Bloomberg were in office. And I will admit, towards the end of the Bloomberg administration, they started to back off on patrols. But I know at the end of the Giuliani administration, they always had patrols, even after 9/11. So, here's what I have to say. Fend for yourself. Speak up. If you get attacked in the subway, tell your story. Because it's very important that you are heard. And I want our media, and this is the example, I want our media to keep covering this show how there is no law and order on our subways under the Blasio administration, because the reason why I voted for Bo Dietl was for change. I wanted to dump the mayor to have safer subways. Alright, that was one of the reasons why. And maybe Maliotakis would have done something. But de Blasio, and so before I hit the stop record button, all Bill de Blasio does about this is that, oh, you get stabbed? Oh, well, that's what he says. Thank you for watching.